businesses go through different phases of growth and evolution. And the team that got you to here is not necessarily the team that is going to get you to there or to what's next. And so, as a CEO, you're in a pretty unique position because it's really the only job in the company where you can actually hire people who are better than you and more senior than you. And so, for me, scaling leadership has really been thinking about for whatever phase we're in at any given point in time. Is the team that got us to this point going to be the same as the team that got us to the next, that's going to get us to the next point? And if not, who are the people who are better at their jobs than I will ever be that we need to bring in and replace?
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow?
Today we're going to talk about scaling leadership. You may not understand the phrase, but the simple version of this is your company will not grow unless you're scaling yourself as a leader and scaling the leaders within your organization. Everyone has experienced this. If you've ever felt like you're pulling your people, they're not growing fast enough, they're not confident enough, they're not strategic enough, whatever it is, you've probably experienced the people problems that go with not scaling leadership within your company. Our special guest today is the CEO of Facet. They are a consumer fintech company. They've got a unique model in that they are not a percentage-based assets under management. They are actually doing flat fee. I won't get into the details of it. He explains it a little bit better than I do. But Anders and I talk about scaling leadership. And one of the areas we talked about is how he continues to scale himself, how he invests in coaches, how he really puts himself into thinking differently as the company has scaled. And he's been through a lot of these different growth points and choke points of growth and has come out on the other side and continuing to grow. All of that being said, you've got to scale leadership, not just at the leadership level, but also within the company. And so we look at a little bit of that as well. My name is Gene Hammett. I am an executive coach, specifically a CEO coach, but my team behind me works with managers and executives to coach them using our tools and models that accelerate their transformation. And I say this because I'd love for you to really think about, are you evolving at the pace you need to? Are you scaling yourself as your company scales? Are your people scaling fast enough? And if not, we should have a conversation about what's next for you. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm not trying to give you something that you don't need, but I'd love to have a conversation with you using some of my models and tools for you to self-assess yourself and for you to decide what's the highest priority at this point. A lot of people don't know what that is. I've used this and I've done this many, many times successfully. So I'm happy to share them with you and give them to you. Send me an email, gene@genehammett.com, and we'll talk about it. What you'll get out of it is clarity. You'll get a confidence about moving forward. And we won't even talk about how I can work with you or my team. But if you do want to do that, we would do that in a separate call. The first call would be just about where you are and really help you develop the plan with the right priorities in place and identify your leadership blind spots. If you're curious, go to gene@genehammett.com. Let's have that conversation. Now, here's the interview with Anders. Anders, how are you?
Hey, Gene, great to be here.
I'm excited about our interview today. We're going to talk about scaling leadership. Specifically, let's dive into your company first. Tell us about Facet.
Yeah, so Facet is a consumer fintech company, and we do financial planning and financial advice on a subscription basis, meaning we don't charge for assets and we don't charge any commissions on products that we sell or anything like that. And we focus on the mass affluent market. So basically, folks that have less than $1 million that wouldn't typically work with a traditional financial advisor. So company's been around since 2016. We've scaled it nicely over the last 8 or 9 years, raised a bunch of venture capital, and really excited about building the future of financial advice.
Fantastic. I think a lot of probably our listeners are, using fee-based advisors.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to go with this approach?
The short version of the story is in 2015, the Department of Labor tried to pass what was known as the fiduciary rule, which was basically a rule that said if you're a financial advisor, you now have to act in the best interest of your clients. And first of all, it's crazy that wasn't a rule to begin with. And what's even crazier is that rule didn't pass. And the pushback from the industry was, if you do this, you're going to have about 8 million households that currently work with an advisor that will lose their advisor relationship because the advisor can't afford to both service them and act in their best interest at the same time. And so, in my mind, this is like a very sort of public admission that, yeah, we're screwing 8 million of our clients, but like better for us to screw them a little bit and them to have an advisor than to like not screw them at all. Which is just like kind of a crazy, like sort of, leap of logic, I suppose. So, when we looked at it, we basically said, really what's going on is underneath all of this, you've got two issues. Number one is the cost of providing really high quality financial advice is very high. And so if we can build a company that focuses on lowering the cost and increasing the access, there's a whole bunch of people out there who desperately want and need the help. And we can service them in a much better way. And then the second insight was the way in which advisors charge for advice doesn't align sort of how people are paying and the value that they're receiving. And the extension of that is it closes out a huge chunk of the market. Think about someone who's earning a couple $100,000 a year but doesn't have any meaningful savings. An advisor who charges on a fee basis doesn't can't actually work with that person because they can't charge enough of the $10,000 of savings that they have to actually cover their costs. So, long story short, we basically said, look, if we innovate the cost model and innovate the pricing and the business model, there's a massive market here that really wants and needs the help, and that's what we've done. So we estimate there's about 40 million households in the U.S. that fall into our demographic of folks that that our service offering really resonates with that wouldn't typically work with a traditional advisor.
I follow a guy named Ramit Sethi.
Yeah, good friend of
You know
ours.
him? Huh?
He's a good friend of ours.
Okay, so just so the audience would kind of know, he wrote a book. I think it's titled "I Can Make You Rich" or something along those lines. He's got a Netflix special now where he
Yep.
looks at people's budgets, and this is one of the big areas that he is different from most people. Is he will say never use that paid advisor that gets paid on assets under management.
Yeah.
But to find a fee based, I guess similar to you, is that the reason why you guys are friends?
Yeah, we have a great partnership with him actually. As you can imagine, he gets a lot of people asking him questions about where can I go and find a flat fee advisor, and so we work with him, on that. But yeah, no, he's absolutely right. I mean, I think two quick points on this. Number one is if you think about what you're actually buying with financial advice, you are buying a professional service, right? So similar to a lawyer or a CPA, you're buying someone's expertise to give you a plan or an ongoing relationship with advice. The AUM based model, the sort of classic rebuttal from the advisor is, well, if you make more money, I make more money, so we're aligned. But the reality is 99% of advisors are not actually actively managing your money and trying to beat the market. And if they are, you should run the other way. And so you're not really paying for outperformance. You're paying for professional service, and they've just figured out a way to charge that results in them making a lot more money. And certainly over the period of 20 or 30 years, if you're working with them, the compounding effect of that 1% fee is way, 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 you're paying way more than you would if you just charge a flat annual fee.
Well, Anders, I appreciate giving us a little bit of the behind the scenes look at this market. I think a lot of people are probably curious about it. So if you guys want to reach out to Anders to see how his company works and is it a fit for you, more than welcome for you guys to check out Facet. I don't get any cuts, no commissions. You're not paying to be here.
Nope.
I just brought you in because I really respect what you guys have done from a company standpoint. We do a lot of research before we put guests on. We probably get about 20 to 30 pitches a day
Oh, wow.
to want to be on the podcast. We mostly can't accept any of them because they're trying to sell us on themselves. We like to curate guests like yourself, Anders. So you're in good company.
It's great to be here.
Our team does a pre-interview with everyone that comes on, and one of the phrases that came out that makes you guys successful. You have 150 employees, so you've got to, you can't just leverage it all by yourself. You've got to, build a team around you. But the term scaling leadership is what came out of those conversations. Would you give us your best definition on what you mean by scaling leadership?
Well, that's a big question. I think at a high level, as you're growing a business quickly, well, actually, at any pace, really, businesses go through different phases of growth and evolution. And the team that got you to here is not necessarily the team that is going to get you to there. or to what's next. And so as a CEO, you're in a pretty unique position because it's really the only job in the company where you can actually hire people who are better than you and more senior than you. And so, for me, scaling leadership has really been thinking about for whatever phase we're in at any given point in time, is the team that got us to this point going to be the same as the team that got us to the next, that's going to get us to the next point? And if not, who are the people who are better at their jobs than I will ever be that we need to bring in and replace? And that's a pretty painful process because, certainly in the early days of a company, you're comrades more than you are colleagues, in the sense that you're doing something that's never been done before. You're in the trenches together. You're working 80 100-hour weeks together, and you end up becoming friends. And so, swapping out talent, even though it's the right thing for the company, is a very painful and emotional thing. And so, when you say the phrase scaling leadership, I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is, basically getting comfortable with that and being willing to have those tough conversations and make those tough decisions in the interest of the company, even though you're probably saying goodbye to some folks that, you've come a long way with.
Let me break in here for a second. Anders was talking about something, and this comes up quite often. The team that got you here won't be the team that gets you to the next level. Marshall Goldsmith wrote a great book, great title. What got you here won't get you there. You can read that book, or you can just take this little bit of a summary and to help you. You've gotten to where you are today because of who you are, your skill sets, and the way you think, your mindset. But you have to continue to evolve. Now, when you put the spin on it around team, the people that you hired when you were scrappy and you were maybe 20 people may not make the journey when you get to be 100. They may not think strategically enough. They may not have the ability to use technology and automation the way it needs to be used. And so you have to bring in outside experts. Maybe it's outside leaders, maybe it's outside salespeople, maybe it's outside whatever. But the team that got you here may not be the team that gets you here. It's a struggle that a lot of people make because they care so much and have so much compassion for the people that work for them, which is a very, very good thing. But overall, the company will hit plateaus and it will hit new levels of stress for yourself if you don't accept that the team that got you here may not be the team to take you to the next level. Now back to Anders. I did not pay you to drop that in there. And I know I did share with you, I have a book about tough conversations.
Oh, yeah.
You haven't read it yet. So I'm just kind of curious, what is your take on why people are avoiding them? And then second part of that question would be how to do or have a tough conversation when you need to.
There's a great saying that's something along the lines of like, easy choices, hard life, hard choices, easy life.
Yeah.
And I view kind of tough conversations in those in that way. What I would say is the best way that I found to have them is to have them when you don't need to have them. And what I mean by that is if you're waiting to a point where frustration or a lack of performance or whatever has kind of hit a boiling point, you're actually probably having the conversation too late. And so, like one thing that we do, which I think is, fairly somewhat unique and maybe a little non-obvious is, and kind of going back to this framework of you're going to have these, finite periods of time where the people that are in the seat are going to be good, and then they need to either grow and evolve or get swapped out. When we hire people, we actually have a conversation up front and say, look, you are the person for this job for the next 18 months. After that, the company's going to change. The job is going to change. Maybe you're going to be the person for that. Maybe not. One of two things is going to happen. We are going to invest as much as we possibly can to grow you into that next leg of the journey. And if you get there, great. But if you don't, we are going to do everything we can to find you an amazing opportunity somewhere else. And so we have that when we hire someone. We have that conversation when we hire someone, which is like a weird way to start a relationship, but it sets the expectation and it sets the tone of there's no shame in it, right? Like we're hiring them because we think they're going to be amazing for what we need them to do. But then at the end of the day, the company will outgrow them at some point. Company's going to outgrow me at some point. It hasn't happened yet, but it probably will. And there's no shame in that. There's just different people are good at different things. And those are actually the sort of quote unquote tough conversations that are actually much easier to have before you need to. And so that's kind of my approach to a lot of these.
I've got to interject here again. Anders is talking about hiring. One of the things that we've done when we're analyzing this and from a consulting or coaching basis with clients that are struggling in certain roles is they're willing to give people chances. And we felt like a lot of times they're taking on people that don't really know what the job is. And so they get into it for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and then they realize it's not for them. And so one of the things that we've done that I'm going to share with you that you can still and use is when in the hiring process, you're upfront with people, you tell them the real truth of this job. The way Anders explained it, the real truth of this is we're giving you this job for 18 months. And if you continue to evolve with us, you'll continue to have a place here. But if you don't, you may have to find another place and we'll help you do that. They're very, kind about it and compassionate about it, but it's upfront. And so when we were working with one of the clients, it was a customer service role, as I remember, and they were bringing in people and they were leaving. They had like a 97% attrition rate and we got it down to 11%. One of the big things that we shifted there was we were willing to have conversations with people and only invite people to the job after they understood what the real responsibilities of the job of customer service are and how it's kind of you're tied to your desk. You're plugged in, and some people think it's micromanagement, but this is just the way this job works. When you're routing calls to a customer service rep, you have to be plugged in, saying that you're ready to accept calls. When you're in the bathroom, you can't accept calls, and they felt like, or many of them felt like it was micromanaging. What I really want to stress here for you is if you want the right culture, you want to hire the right people, be willing to tell them the real truth about the job. Tell them it's hard. Tell them it's going to be long hours. Tell them it's going to be difficult to figure out X, Y, or Z. And the right people will rise to the occasion. The wrong people will be repelled away. This is actually good for marketing, but it's also good for your business. Back to Anders. Well, I agree with you 100%. Just going back to that quote again, easy choices equals a hard life. If you take the easy road, you're going to probably deal with a lot of toxic employees in leadership.
Yeah.
But if you do the hard choices, meaning having those tough conversations early and often, you will have a better place to work and you will attract probably even better talent than you would any other way. So,
Yeah.
uh, Anders, let's get back to the scaling leadership. I'd like to divide this up into at least two different pieces. There may be some more that we can able to fraction off, but one of them is evolving and adapting yourself as a leader. So you've gone through, getting to 50 million and being on this Inc. list, very impressive, but you've had to change over the terms, different inflection points. Is there one or two of these inflection points that you can share with us about your own evolution as a leader?
I mean, there's a lot. It's work that's never done, right? I mean, I think there were, man, again, this is a big question, right? I mean, I think there's parts of this where I can point to inflection points around strategy, company strategy, and thinking about, you know, key learnings that cause us to totally change things like how we go to market or how we deliver our service. And those are, I think you just have to keep an open mind to know that those are going to happen no matter what, and just knowing when to make those decisions is probably more important than the decisions actually are themselves. Certainly a lot of evolution on the people side. I mean, everything that we just talked about, but knowing when someone has sort of hit their potential is a big one, and I think that's harder. The earlier you are, the harder that is to do, just because in the beginning you end up hiring, sort of what I would call like sort of Swiss Army knife players, right? These are folks that are good at a lot of different things and you can deploy them on a problem. And so they appear to be incredibly competent and you're like, wow, this person could run this company one day. But then that only works up until a certain scale, and then you actually need to bring in position players who are very, very good at whatever the one specific thing is that you need them to do. And then once you get into the world of your team is sort of filled with position players, then it actually becomes a lot easier to sort of say like, okay, yeah, this person is doing a good job, or they're ready to scale for the next 25 million of revenue, or whatever it is. But it's when you make that transition from the Swiss Army knife player to the position player, I think that it gets really tough. That's the sort of painful thing that you have to go through. I mean, you asked about my own sort of leadership evolution. I honestly would say I don't know that there's any one point that I could point to where there was like a, sort of like step function change. I mean, I think my position has always been, I started Facet when I was 29 years old and, sort of right out of the gate hired some people who had a lot more experience than I did. And I think that created a certain level of imposter syndrome, which frankly has persisted, 9 years later. And I actually think that if you can stay on the right side of it, it's actually an incredibly healthy thing because it makes you humble and it makes you sort of constantly want to learn and grow. And that's honestly, I think, if I could point to one sort of trait that I've developed more and more over time, it's the humility muscle that you I think the more you grow, the more you realize you don't know, and that really sets you up for for fast changes and iterations when you need them.
And correct me if I'm wrong, you have coaches that have guided you probably now and in the past
Yeah.
without kind of, this is not a commercial, you're not my client, put that out
Yep.
there very clearly, but you've had coaches. Why would you reach out to coaches when you're already successful and you're already, doing the thing? What value is having someone in your corner like that been for you?
Oh, it's incredibly important. If the Probably the most important thing is you have someone who can pull you out of the weeds, and there's that saying like being able to see the forest for the trees. When you're in it every single day, it's often very hard to take a step back and look at the forest. And so what I've found is that all of the coaches that I've ever worked with are very good at sort of pulling me back and saying like, okay, let's take a beat and look at the bigger picture, and are the things that you're focused on a day-to-day basis actually connected to the big vision that you have? And more often than not, I'll find areas for improvement or holes in sort of what I'm how I'm thinking about things. So that kind of reflection is really important. And I work right now with I'm very, very fortunate. I have like a great support network. I have, a true kind of executive leadership coach that I've worked with for 6 years. I have like a mind body guy that, sort of both, physical and mental performance. I work with a nutrition coach. That was an addition in the last year.
Yeah.
And then I also have a peer group of 6 other CEOs that I meet with once a month. And, that's more of a sort of, sharing amongst ourselves. So, I'm like I said, I'm very fortunate that I've got a really great support network around me that that keeps me healthy and focused.
Well, Anders was talking about why coaching. Let me just give you my 2 cents of coaching, why I invest in coaches. I get too focused on the day to day. And when I'm talking to my coach, he helps me see what I can't see for myself, my blind spots, or maybe it's just a different perspective. And so I get a lot of value out of investing in someone else in that relationship because I know I'm growing and it's not always comfortable, but it is always appreciated. I look back at everything I've done and all the investments I've had, with my coaches over the years, and I've spent probably $500,000 in 20 plus years. And that's a lot of money. But I wouldn't be where I am today. I wouldn't have the success. I wouldn't have the team. I wouldn't have the life if I didn't have these coaches pushing me and helping me see what I can't see for myself. Now that's just for me. I don't know what it is for you, but if you need someone pushing you, then you want to make sure you can find the right coach. And happy to help you with that journey. Maybe I know someone, maybe it's me. Don't know until we talk. So if you're curious about that, send me an email, gene@genehammett.com. I'll be happy to have that conversation with you. Back to Anders. I'm the same way. I have multiple coaches for different reasons, and I know I perform better. Every once in a while, my wife, I will go to her and say, "Hey, can I get this coach or do this thing?" And she looks at me, she goes, "I don't know why you don't trust yourself. You perform better when you have someone pushing you."
Yeah.
And it's true. I know I wanted to wrap this up, Anders, but one more question I have for you is, scaling leadership. We've talked about you. How do you ensure that your employees are scaling? Because some may not make the journey, as you said,
Yeah.
but you're doing and investing in your people. What has worked for you and your team?
Yeah. So first of all, it comes the first part that's most important is you got to set the tone culturally. So we have this internal ethos where we basically say that we are all growth seekers, and we've kind of defined this term of growth seeker as as someone who is sort of never content to rest on their laurels and is always sort of looking for, excuse me, that next level of personal growth. And so when you set that tone, and I mean, we post about stuff like this in Slack on a daily basis, where it's like, okay, here's a growth seeking moment today from this person, or here's something I did that I felt good about growing. That you get this sort of momentum that builds around that idea, and people really really it resonates with them. And so I've sort of said very openly, I want to build a company that helps millions of Americans live better financial lives, and also a company where everyone who works here will look back on their time here and say, I did the best work in my career at Facet. And so setting that tone up front has been that's the most important thing. And then, from there, every manager has sort of individual growth plans for each one of their team members. So everyone knows what their trajectory is and what their potential is. And then it's a question of, can you as a team member and in conjunction with your manager achieve that. And so, we look very closely at how are people progressing based on what we think their potential is. And, we do on our management team, we do quarterly reviews of everyone. We put them in a 9-box and we say, okay, who's on the way up, who, is not. And, it's rigorous and it's very important. But the end result is that our team feels like we are really investing in them. And it's a two-way contract where we're doing our part, they have to do their part. And we've seen some incredible success stories from that.
Great conversation. I could keep going, Anders, but I know that we agreed to this in advance. So I really appreciate you being here, sharing your wisdom about scaling leadership.
Cool. Thanks, Gene.
Wow, another fantastic interview. Scaling leadership is something I'm doing all the time. I'm the leader of leaders as a CEO coach. And what Anders has been talking about, what he's been doing with his different coaches, I've been doing myself. I've been doing for my clients. I don't get into the nutrition side. I do it for myself with my nutrition coaches, but I'm really excited to be able to help you be the leader that you want to be. If you want to scale your own leadership, let's have a conversation about how you do that, what's really getting in your way, and just send me an email, gene@genehammett.com. When you think of growth and you think of leadership, think of growth thinking. As always, with courage. We'll see you next time.